Today, I am delighted to be joined by one of Australia's representatives for the newest of Olympic sports, sport climbing. After winning the sort of Oceania qualifiers late last year, he's now preparing to compete and complete a childhood dream of competing at the Olympics in Tokyo this year. Tom O'Halloran, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's awesome to be able to sit down and have a chat.
Well, let's start back at the very beginning. Let's talk about your childhood. Did you have a sporty childhood growing up? Were there a lot of different sports involved there?
Yeah, you name a sport and I did it growing up. I just absolutely loved it. It was, yeah, playing cricket in the backyard during cricket season, playing footy in the backyard during footy season, like just always on my bike, on a skateboard. We were at the beach all the time and just I just loved it. I just loved moving and that feeling. Um, yeah, yeah. Mum and dad said that I was always just climbing out of the cot. And at like some sort of ludicrously young age, I was climbing out of the cot and climbing in the mango tree in the backyard, and it was just like, yeah, everything.
So you clearly spent a lot of time outdoors as a kid. Do you think that kind of, obviously everyone in Australia, we spend time outdoors as kids. That's kind of the thing that we do here. But for you in particular, do you think that had a strong influence on you and why you've become so passionate for climbing? You can look back to those days as a kid and go, yeah, that's really where it started.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, as you say, as Australians, a lot of us grow up with the outdoors and the access to all the amazing things that we have in our country. But yeah, I guess it's where it feels natural to be outside for me. I get really claustrophobic inside, and don't get me wrong, I love sitting down on the couch and chilling out and watching a bit of TV or something like that. But I really do just like doing things, and climbing's an amazing outlet for that for me.
Now, I was reading on your website and your bio that your parents signed you up to the local climbing center at about age 12. Is that kind of where maybe a competitive edge kind of started to it?
Um, I don't think it was all that competitive in the beginning. It was just, I was saying before, like climbing in the mango tree and in the backyard. I'd watch the Tarzan movie and then go and try and do that kind of stuff and like stand on branches and jump around and doing laps around the house, just hanging onto the windowsills and stuff like that. Um, and mum and dad probably just thought, you know what, it's probably about time that we signed him up to something a little bit safer. And yeah, got me into the climbing gym when I was 12, and that was just awesome. There was one that had just recently opened up in Brisbane that was, a month or two old, and yeah, they got me into it there. And just from day one, it was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. This is fun.
You mentioned like climbing around windowsills and things like that in your house. Were there many injuries or anything like that early on when you were a kid?
No, not from climbing around, I don't think. I've broken both my collarbones playing footy, and rolled ankles doing silly things. Yeah, I've had my fair share of injuries, but never from climbing at that younger point, at least. Yeah, yeah.
So that's probably why it kind of kept motivating you to keep going with it because it's like, oh, I'm not getting hurt. I'm enjoying it. So I may as well keep going.
Yeah, exactly. But you do hear people say that, like, if you if you get injured and you're still hungry to get back, that's when you know that that's when it's like, oh yeah, this is the sport. This is the like thing that I want to be doing. And yeah, yeah. Even just like, in the beginning, your hands are quite soft, and rock climbing's quite you know, pretty hand intense. And people often ask, do you wear gloves and stuff? And it's like, nah, it's like you get the best friction from your hands and a bit of chalk and that kind of thing. But you'd end up just with like these enormous, we call them flappers, like just big chunks of skin that have basically worn off. You get the blister and then they peel off. And even just those little things in the beginning, like you'd try and like tape it up and protect it a bit, but it got to the point where it was just way too painful. But even just those little things, you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait a week before I can do anything again. This sucks.
Obviously, you were signed up to the indoor center, but it's pretty clear looking at you now and looking at, say, your videos on YouTube and things like that, that outdoor is really where the love of climbing sort of, that's where your main love is. And as a kid, was it hard to kind of convince your parents to go, no, I want to climb on the big rock somewhere else instead of just being safe in an indoor center and mats below you and things like that?
No, yeah, they were super happy to try and get me outdoors and be a part of that. Like, dad got into climbing at the same time as me, and my younger brother did as well. And my younger brother kind of he ticked around for a little bit, but it never really blew his hair back. But dad and I got out climbing outdoors a whole bunch, and we met up with some other people at the climbing gym that kind of helped get us started. And these are the ropes you need, these are the harnesses, this is the safety equipment, and taught us how to be safe out there. And yeah, it was really awesome. I'm really quite thankful for mum and dad have never really held me back from any of it, and it's pretty awesome to have had that support network, and also with dad to be able to share that experience with him. Like, I don't know that there's many young men growing up that get to have that kind of relationship with their dad, and those experiences, and it's something that I think brought us really close, and yeah, something I'm super grateful for, and something that I'd like to kind of bring into raising my daughter, is trying to have that real strong connection.
So, how frequently as a kid would you be going climbing with your dad or just by yourself? Was it weekends? Was it after school? Was it just whenever you could?
Yeah, it was a bit of so the kids club that I got signed up to, that was it was once a week in the beginning. And I do it would be climbing in the morning before cricket in the afternoon, or before in winter it'd be rugby in the afternoon. And then as I got older, I moved up into the next, from the kids club into the sort of teenage club, and that was twice a week. That would be like indoor kind of, call it training, but it wasn't really training. We were just going in there and hanging out as a bit of a team, and then getting outdoors maybe once a week. It's pretty cool. In Brisbane, there's the Kangaroo Point Cliffs that are right in the middle of the city, and so we lived 15 minutes from there, so we could pretty easily get in there and just do a little bit of outdoor climbing there. But then also up to the Glasshouse Mountains and out around the Boona area. There's quite a lot out there, and we'd get out and do a little bit, sort of a couple of times a month in the beginning there. Yeah, it just kind of grew from there. Basically, started getting out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and then it was just, yeah, climbing nonstop.
Was there anyone in particular you looked up to as a kid climbing? Were there people in your sort of indoor center that you looked up to go, oh, I'd love to be like them? Or was there any other particular role model that you went, that's who I kind of want to be like in the sport?
Yeah, there's definitely the people that, like, the older guys in the and some of the girls as well, for sure. Like, that you look up to as the, like, oh wow, like, one of my coaches, Tiff, she was going out to try this really hard climb on the weekend, and everyone's like, oh wow, she's going to go out and try that, and it was it's quite a buzz, and that was quite cool. You're like, that's rad. And there's a few other guys that were there as well, and um, yeah, you just kind of looked up to them as being like a bit of a role model in a way, and you're like, I want to be as good as Ads one day, or I want to be as good as Pete, and I wanted to have the same shoes as them and have the same t-shirts and all that kind of stuff, because 12, 13 years old, super impressionable, and just totally psyched out on that stuff. Like, there's a real just I don't know how you describe it, but like almost like this kind of innocence to that time, and that enthusiasm that you have for something. It's just like pure joy. And yeah, it's something that I think maybe we can lose a little bit as we get a bit older and become a bit more caught up with the world. But yeah, that was really cool, and I'm still good friends with a lot of those people as well.
at that point when you're sort of in your late teen years and you're looking up to people around you, do you have a do you recognize what I guess the pinnacle of the sport was? And obviously Olympics isn't even in the picture for sport climbing at that stage. So when you're at that level, what are you looking up to and going, this is what I want to try and achieve?
Yeah, so like I started in 2001. Oh, sorry, 2004. I started climbing. And I remember going into the climbing gym, doing my first little lesson, and coming home because we had some family friends that sort of helped start us get into it, and they were climbers as well. And we went around to their place after my first climbing session, and they gave us some of their old harnesses and shoes to use. And Pete, who was 2 years older than me, I think, so he's 14. He's like, "Oh, this is the latest climbing movie that's just come out. That's got footage of the best climber in the world doing the hardest route in the world." And at that stage, it's like there's no box to put that information in. Like climbing is only something that, like, prior to basically going to the climbing gym, I didn't really know that rock climbing existed as a thing. Like you understood mountain climbing, mountaineering, that kind of stuff. Like, oh yeah, people climb Everest and it's really cold and snowy. But rock climbing as a concept was super strange. And so Pete shows me this footage of Chris Sharma climbing this route called Biography in the south of France. And Chris Sharma, he's an American, um, and it's taken him several trips across the course of several years to try and do this 30 meters of climbing. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, I don't know what any of that means, but God, it looks like I want to do this. And after that experience that I'd had that morning, walking into the climbing gym and doing my first couple of climbs and being like, yeah, this is it. And then you go and see that that stuff's happening outside. And it's like far out. Like that is it. Like it was just like my mind's just getting blown. Um, and fast forward to 2015 or something. I was kind of at a level to be able to try and attempt that particular route. And I went to Sayus in France and went and tried to climb that climb. And I didn't climb it at the time. And I went back in 2018 and tried to do it. So 2015, there was a huge heat wave and it was like utterly atrociously hot. 2018 or 17, I can't remember which one, we went back with my family that time, with my partner, Amanda, and 4-year-old daughter at the time, Audrey, to try and climb it again. But yeah, it was super rainy that year and didn't really get a good opportunity. But it was just like kind of a trip out to have this thing that is on this pedestal from the beginning, that you're now there climbing on the same climb as this footage that you watched all those years ago. And it's not the hardest route in the world anymore. From 2001 to now, there's been harder climbs done, but it is still one of the hardest. So yeah, it's kind of cool to try and or to make yourself a part of that, just even for a brief moment. And I'd love to go back and try and just complete it one day.
Is that, I guess, part of the appeal to you of rock climbing and sport climbing? I guess that whereas some of the other sports that you've mentioned in Olympic sports, cricket, rugby, swimming, it's all takes place in a small area. Like you don't go beyond that, but there's kind of a limitless aspect to climbing that you can always achieve something else. You can achieve something more, and you're not confined by anything in particular.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the incredible thing. Even like there's the indoors and the outdoors. And the outdoors, it's like there's so many new cliffs or pieces of rock to go and discover, and it's just a matter of like going that next little bit, walking around the corner to try and find that thing. And you don't know it's there, but you just go out and have a look. And even discovering a new path on a cliff that already exists. It's sort of there for your imagination to interpret. And then indoors is almost the same. Like it's, depending on the types of wall and stuff, as someone that kind of sets the moves on a route, you get to play with all these cool climbing holds and screw them onto the wall and use your imagination as to how you could possibly solve that. And you come up with the move. You're like, oh, it'd be amazing to have to jump to that with your left hand and then swing around with your feet above your head and catch that. And you get to kind of play with that. And there's such a real creativity and freeness to that experience, which I feel like many other sports don't necessarily have. And that's definitely a big draw card for me, that it's kind of this whole experience with climbing.
I want to chat about some of your early Olympic memories. Obviously, it's pretty clear as a kid growing up, you were very involved in sport, whatever it might be. But when it came to the Olympics, did you have anything in particular that you're like, that I have to watch the swimming or the sprinting? Or were you much of a fan of the Olympics growing up as a kid?
Yeah, definitely a huge fan of the Olympics growing up. I remember in 2000, the year 2000, I was 8 years old, and watching the opening ceremony of the Sydney Games. And at that point, I didn't know what the Olympics was. It's just like we didn't have a TV. We were living in this super small little town. It was not even a town. It's like this little collection of houses. And we went around to someone's house, a friend's house that had a TV, and we were watching the opening ceremony. It was like, whoa, what is this? And yeah, mum and dad are like, yeah, this is the Olympics and this is the opening ceremony, and everyone's walking around waving their flags and wearing tracksuit pants, and there's this whole big flame in the middle of the stadium, and it's like, what? And they explained what the Olympics was, and everyone comes together and competes in all these different sports, and there's running races and swimming and volleyball and basketball and soccer and all the other bits and pieces. I was like, I want to be a part of that one day. That looks amazing. And yeah, just hoped that one day, I might be able to be good enough to represent Australia. And I remember even just that year going around to watch Kathy Freeman's 400, was it the 400-meter run? And we went around to someone else's house, our next door neighbors, and I didn't know really who she was, other than she was our runner in this race, and she was going for the gold medal. And there was probably, oh look, my memory is pretty vague, but I remember a lot of people being in the house to watch this race, and everyone stood there to watch 60 seconds of this person run around a track. And it's like, this is crazy. Like, this is insane that this is like, it's, yeah, it was really cool to see just how it captured everyone's imagination and attention. You're like, this is awesome. Like, I really want to do this. And, obviously there's the highlight sports that everyone tunes into every time. It's the 100 meters, running, it's the 50 freestyle, and any of the other kind of bigger events that pop up as an underdog gets through, or, the Australians get into the final of something. But yeah, it's always just been there. And then I think it was about 2016 that climbing got announced as an Olympic sport.
Where were you when that was kind of announced, and what were your emotions at that time, thinking, hang on a second, this dream that I had as a kid to compete at the Olympics, I now seriously have a chance at this?
Yeah, I was actually not that keen on it in the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, because of the three
Because,
different disciplines.
yeah, and I was very much an outdoor climber at that point. Like, I grew up in Brizzy, and then 2011 I moved down to the Blue Mountains, and that's where I've called home for the last 10 years now. But very much fell in love with outdoor climbing at that point. Through my earlier years up to then, I was doing a lot of competitions. I went to World Youth Championships a couple of times, and did national events and stuff, but not necessarily because I had like a real competitive drive. It was just that, we're in the city, you go to the climbing gym, you try and get out to the cliff during the week, but a competition had come up and you're like, oh yeah, cool, might as well go in it. But moving to the Blue Mountains, I really fell in love with the outdoor climbing, and that exploration and just the freeness of it. And there was the chance to go in a few competitions, and it was always just like, no way, I want to go outside. And then you, it was hard to then bring the two back together, even though, like, yeah, you find out that it's happening and you're like, well, here's my opportunity. Because at that point I was climbing some of the hardest routes in the country and kind of had this ability to maybe, compete and qualify. But yeah, it was a bit of a trip out, and it took a while for me to actually want to, dedicate myself to it and go for it. And yeah, as you say, like the combined format of it. So within competition climbing, there's three disciplines. There's speed climbing, bouldering, and lead climbing. Speed climbing, it's 15-meter race. Basically, there's two identical routes right next to each other. It's the same route all the way around the world. It's completely standardized on the exact same holds, the exact same wall angle, the belay devices in the same spot, and it's just who gets to the top fastest. And then the bouldering is, so that was kind of, it was sort of this like weird, I don't know, it's strange facet of the sport that in quotation marks, the true climbers didn't compete in. No one was really interested in speed climbing, because generally the speed climbers weren't very good difficulty climbers, which is where the bouldering and the lead climbing kind of comes into its own, is like the difficulty of it. So there's a lot of uproar around how that was going to transition. It's kind of like asking a track athlete to do the 50 meters freestyle as well as the 1500 and the 200 or the 400 or something like that. They're really quite different energy systems for one, but just like the type of athlete and everything. Yeah, so there's a lot of outcry around that, and I was definitely a part of it, and thought that it was a bit of a bummer that climbing had to become something different to become an Olympic sport. But as I kind of had my whole process, it's actually a stroke of genius that all three have been put together. And it's actually really awesome. And I'm so psyched on it now, because it's brought together a different type of athlete, and one that is way more well-rounded than just being a specialist. And there's always been that question of, who's the best rock climber in the world? And it's like, oh, well, this person's really good at that, but they're not very good at this, and blah, blah, blah. But for me, the answer to that question is, who is the best across the most number of disciplines? And that's what we get to see with that combined format. And there's been a new group or a different type of athlete that's come out, and yeah, it is really quite cool and exciting to see that.
How did you kind of feel when, obviously in March, the decision was made to postpone the Olympics? I guess you guys hadn't really had your qualifiers yet, so you weren't sure if you'd be even going. But at that point, knowing that, this chance of going to the Olympics might be put on hold for 12 months, another 4 years, who knows how long?
Yeah, that was it was pretty shocking, really. We'd kind of seen it happening from late January to February. You'd heard of coronavirus, and you're starting to see it happen. And you're like, oh yeah, cool. It'll just be one of those things. Like, we had swine flu, and it was a bit scary scary almost. It was just like people were wearing masks and looking after themselves, but it wasn't as broad sweeping and devastating as what the coronavirus stuff eventually was. And so at that point I was like, oh yeah, we'll have to be look around, but it's in Italy at the moment, and there's a bit of stuff in Asia, and we don't need to worry about it. But then it's kind of becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger thing. It's like, whoa. And then, like, I remember hearing on the radio, like, that in Austria you could only have 5 people around to your house. It's like, whoa. Banning gatherings, and you're like, this is crazy. And then within 2 weeks or something, it's in Australia. Those restrictions are coming into place. And on the 19th of March, I lost my job. And then on like the 22nd of March, the event got called off. We were due to compete for our Olympic spot on, perhaps it was like the 27th of March or something like that. And a week beforehand, the event gets cancelled. And I actually remember being down at the climbing gym in Sydney and was doing a training session and just having a scroll through Instagram on my rest break, and saw that I think that morning before I left, the Formula One had been cancelled. And then I was looking at the World Surf League. I quite enjoy surfing and watching that. And I saw that the World Surf League had cancelled the Gold Coast event that was due to start in a few days' time as well. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is actually happening. And then a day or two later, our event got cancelled. And yeah, there was a sense of relief almost in the beginning, because there's so much pressure build up ahead of a competition. And for someone to just be like, it's not happening, you're like, oh, that pressure's just gone. Oh, that's great. But then there was this like bitter taste in your mouth as you're like, oh, well, what does that mean? Like, the Olympics are still going ahead. Like, does that mean that we don't have someone go? Does that mean like someone that may have like, yeah, like, what does it mean? And it was a bit a bit scary and annoying, and a bit of a like kick in the guts for all of this preparation that all of the athletes had put in, and suddenly it's taken away. And that really sucked. And at that point it really showed just how much it did matter, and how much you did want it, when it just gets ripped away from you like that. And then I've got to admit, when they decided to postpone the Olympics, there's a sigh of relief that perhaps we still had a chance to try and qualify, because it was just it's like, all right, cool. Well, maybe we can run our Oceania, our qualifying event sometime in the future before the next Olympics comes around. So yeah, that was good.
What did 2020 kind of look for you then? Like, because obviously you mentioned you lost your job. There's no Olympics to look forward to. So with restrictions, were you still able to get out and climb much? I imagine outdoor climbing, it's kind of helps that it can be such an individual activity at times.
Yeah. At that point, yeah, I was there's a lot of fear around what financially what was going to happen. I've got a mortgage, I've got bills to pay. You got to put food on the table, that kind of thing. So that was kind of scary, but luckily my partner, she's a dietitian and sport dietitian, and her work almost got busier as people, I guess, maybe were a little bit concerned about trying to become more healthy. So I was able to kind of help out with that a little bit, and support her with that stuff. But also, yeah, just getting out climbing. Like it was the biggest, most dedicated training block I'd ever had. and I just felt incredibly just strong and ready to go. And it's like, oh, all right, cool. No competition, can't go into any of their climbing gyms. Let's go rock climbing. And I was so excited because, you know, the nice, cool, breezy conditions were starting to kick in up here, and which is the good climbing conditions. And it's like, yep, here we go. This is like going to be awesome. And then I did 2 pulley injuries in my fingers and popped my knee in the course of about a month. So I had a good roll of about 6 weeks, where it's just like, yep, here we go. This is going to be awesome. And then injured myself in 3 different ways, and it sucked. Yeah, it was really annoying because you're like, oh. In hindsight, I can see how those injuries have happened. It was basically overuse and not looking after my body quite well enough, giving myself enough time to recover. And yeah, it was really annoying. So yeah, 2020 looked quite a bit different to what I thought it was going to. I kind of just assumed that I'd have a whole bunch of time to get out climbing outdoors and piecing together little bits of work, and just really enjoying being at home. But then I was just kind of stuck, not doing that much and unable to do the things that I wanted to do. But on the other hand, like, it was also quite nice to be forced to do nothing as well, because it's so busy, our life, like between climbing and work and family and all the other bits and pieces that you want to stick into your life. It was kind of nice to take climbing out because it's a huge time investment in our week. My partner's a climber as well, and we spend probably at least 20 hours a week doing it. And to get that time back was pretty good. Got a few chores done around the house and that sort of thing. So that was kind of nice, but yeah, it got a bit annoying. It's just like, oh, I just want to go climbing again and just go out and connect with friends and that kind of thing.
So eventually, I guess the Oceania Championships, the Continental Championships, they get rescheduled to December at the end of last year. I think there were 8 guys, 7 Aussies there competing for that, I guess, preliminary spot for the Olympics. What was the preparation like for that tournament? And were you feeling, I guess, confident leading in?
Yeah, it was funny, that going ahead, because there was a lot of talk around, would that event go ahead and how is it going to go ahead. There was, you know, the lockdown was in full swing in Melbourne, and all the climbing gyms are shut. Everyone's stuck at home, and it was a bit of a surreal kind of thing. And also, there was meant to be 20 male and 20 female athletes there. So, you know, the New Zealand team coming over, and there was an Aussie girl that lives in Canada now that was coming over and competing. So everyone was a bit concerned about how it was all going to go ahead. And then we find out that the event needed to happen by the end of 2020. For whatever reason, there's sort of somewhere within the rule book it needed to happen then. We're all thinking, oh, look, let's just put it forward to March. Everyone trains up, gives time for things to settle down, blah, blah, blah. But yep, it's got to happen in December. And I think everyone was just a bit kind of shocked at how it was all going to play out. And there was concerns about whether the Victorian athletes had a fair shake at being able to compete properly, if they didn't have access to climbing gyms and stuff. Because as much as it's a physical sport in terms of just like the strength, you also need to have your eye in for being able to kind of move and get all the coordination and everything happening as well. But as it turned out, the Victorian athletes had like a special exemption for travel and training and could get to the climbing gym 3 times a week, which was super great to find out about that, because otherwise it would have been hard to go ahead. feeling like it was a fair competition. But I think everyone was kind of in the same boat, really. Like there was a lot of restrictions that we all had to adhere to and move around. But yeah, I think in the end, it was as fair as could be. Um, and the rules were applied across the board for all international events. Like there was still a few more continental events that needed to happen, like the European Championships, the African Championships, and the Asian Championships. So yeah, for that, it was an across the board decision that this was how it was going to be. It's like it's going to happen no matter who can show up, how much training people could do. It's got to happen. And I think just getting started again, I think we all just felt a little bit fatigued, really. Yeah, 2020 was pretty mentally exhausting, I think, for a lot of people, whether it was, all of I kind of saw both extremes of people that were totally shaken and kind of lost work, lost social life, blah, blah, blah. And then other people that had the opposite of that, where it was like my partner, she just became way busier and had way more logistics to deal with. And both of those things are both quite fatiguing. And I think everyone was kind of in that space. And so to get kickstarted again was pretty tough, I think, for everyone. And also you kind of have in the back of your mind of like, is it actually still going to go ahead? Like, is the event going to happen? Because there's still restrictions everywhere, and there's still, bits of kind of COVID popping up. Like, is it going to be safe? Can they do it? How are they going to get people in and out and all that kind of thing? But you can't control those sorts of things. All you can control is you showing up to the climbing gym and training as best you can with the resources that you've got, and making the most of it. And getting caught up with any of the external noise was just, I worked out, just not at all helpful. So it was just like, okay, I'm just going to keep my blinkers on and just keep on marching forward, and whatever happens, happens.
How do you feel about going over there at the moment? Any issues or concerns, or do you feel like that the IOC, the AOC have, for what they can control, they've done as well as they can?
Yeah, I think I feel super safe with it all. There's a lot of smart people in making all the decisions for us to look after us. We've got guidelines coming through. We've got safety advice and all sorts of things. I think that there's a lot of people working really hard to make this go ahead in a safe and responsible kind of way. Yeah, I think it's it's obviously really hard to make it happen, but I think that everyone's doing the best that they can, and I'm fairly confident that it's going to go ahead. Like it's not going to be the Olympic Games that we have seen over the last few years, but yeah, there's too much at stake for it to not go ahead at this point. Like there's so many sponsors and TV rights and marketing and all these things, and even just for the sake of the hope of it all, like that, completely over exaggerating it, but like, it's one of the big bummers of 2020 was the lack of sport on TV. Like everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of us really love sport, and having the sport there and cheering for your team or cheering for your favorite athlete or whatever, like it's awesome and something we get psyched by. And that's what the Olympics gets to be, in the middle of all of this chaos, is just this kind of little thing sat there of like, yeah, we can all sit there and we can watch climbing happen for the first time, and we can watch the 100-meter final, and and get behind the, Aussie trap shooter that makes it through to the gold medal event or whatever it is. Like it's just, yeah, it's something that gets to bring us all together.
What do you think sport climbing being in the Olympics, what do you think that'll bring to the sport and public recognition of it, I guess?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think that I think the world and Australia are going to fall in love with climbing. It's such an incredible sport, and it's something that no matter your age, your physical capabilities, your skill level, any of that, you can participate in it. And you can do it as a family. There's so many climbing gyms and bouldering gyms that are opening up all around the country at the moment. And you can go in there as a family and all try the same thing and all participate at the same time. It's not like cricket where you go out and it's just, the people that are playing and everyone else sits on the sideline. Like you can all be there and be a part of it. And that's pretty amazing. And, it tests your problem solving and your ability to stay calm and maybe dealing with a little bit of fear as people are at height. And also just the physical kind of strength and conditioning that you can get from it. So I think that a lot of people are going to really get psyched by that, and by more people being psyched and involved, it gives more opportunities for the sport to grow, because really at the end of the day it comes down to money, and that gives the more opportunities for better training facilities, better coaches, better money for the athletes, because like in the 10 years that I've been a sponsored rock climber, I've had not more than $2,000 in sponsorship funding across the entire thing, and like I've been one of the best in Australia for that time. Like it's just there's no money in the sport, and if we could change that and have a little bit more cash, then we were able to kind of dedicate ourselves a little bit more to training, and that sort of raises the level. And that'd be pretty special to see like a professional rock climber in Australia would be pretty awesome. There's that overseas in the States and in Europe and all that kind of thing, and it'd be pretty awesome to see in Australia. And I think something that can happen, but yeah, it's a matter of bringing everyone together, and I think that the sport will just show itself as being something awesome, and that's what people can get behind.
Does that give you a lot of encouragement that despite, I guess, the lack of professionalism in terms of the model that supports the climbers here, that once you're at the Olympics, once you're in Tokyo, you're all there competing at the same level? It doesn't matter how much money you make back home, that it's the same wall that everyone's climbing, and you can suddenly, it's a level playing field.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the amount of money that you get in your bank account each week from a sponsor doesn't make your bicep any stronger. It's about the work that you put in the lead up to it, and the dedication and tenacity that you have. And yeah, once you get there, it's just like, cool, starts from scratch. Everyone's here. Everyone's got the same routes to climb. And you've just got to try your hardest and dig in. And I think that one of the great things about climbing is it's as much about the physical side of things as just how much you can keep your head together. And there's people that are extremely strong, and if they've got a bamboozled head, they're not able to do half of what they can.
Now, I guess kind of on that part of it, you are obviously raising some funds to try and help get to the Olympics and to help support your dream. Can you talk to me a little bit about, excuse me, talk to me a little bit about that and sort of what you're looking at trying to achieve there?
Yeah, so just with, I guess, the lack of funding, it's kind of hard to put together a lot of what it takes to try and be as competitive as possible. we don't really have the resources and facilities in Australia at this point in time, unfortunately. So yeah, a bit of that money is to try and help pay for my coach and physio sort of stuff, and the kind of rest and recovery kind of thing, just to try and keep your body in check. And also to pay for route setters, like the people that kind of put the holds on the wall to try and set climbs that are hard enough, basically, because we don't have hard enough climbs in the country at the moment for me to be able to train in the way that I need to be able to train. It's kind of like, I don't know, a 100-meter runner only having a 50-meter track to train on. It's kind of like it's not the whole thing. We need kind of harder stuff. So yeah, just paying for people to try and set harder climbs for me, paying entry to climbing gyms, and the travel and all that kind of thing as well. Unfortunately, sport climbing New South Wales and isn't recognised as a state sporting organisation by the New South Wales Institute of Sport. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the background there, but I think the short story is there was corruption somewhere in the government side of things, and there was basically our application to be put in to and be recognised by the Institute of Sport is on hold and has been on hold for a few years. So the access to the funding that Sport Climbing New South Wales could have to help support me through this is not there. So all of the other states in Australia have that, but my state doesn't. So yeah, a bit of that funding is to kind of make up for that shortfall in what would help support myself through this period. And yeah, it's it's a tricky thing, but you know, it's the beginning. We're in the initial stages of a sport. It's the first time that climbing has been seen at the Olympics, and we're at the beginning. And I'm really excited to help be a part of that and try and pave the way for what it may take for maybe someone else in the future to go on and do like the Usain Bolt 3 gold medals in a row or something like that. Like it'd be pretty rad to see an Australian do that. But you know, for now, it's just basically trying to set up the framework for what we can do and give myself the best opportunity to compete as well as I can over there.
I think that's a really important step that you mentioned because, as you said, it's about this is the first Olympics. It's going to be a new sport and it's going to open up to such a wide audience that there's going to be so many young kids who, I guess, like you were watching Kathy Freeman, they'll see you guys competing in sport climbing and go, "Oh, that looks really cool. That's something I want to try," and will inspire a new generation.
You look at what happened. Was it 2008 or something during the Soccer World Cup when the Socceroos qualified? Like, yeah, have a look at the number of youth sign-ons for soccer in that
Yeah,
year. It just
participation.
exploded. Like everyone was psyched on soccer, and that has or football. You know, it's just and that's built something. And now we're starting to see the fruits of that because that's the development from the beginning. And now we're 10 years later, and those 8-year-olds then are now 16 and they're coming into those development squads. And like it's yeah, it's cool to start to see that stuff, and to be at the beginning of it is pretty special.
One or two more questions for me because you've been very generous with your time, which I really appreciate. On those cold mornings in the Blue Mountains, I know they can get very cold mornings up there in the middle of winter when you don't want to get out of bed, but you go, okay, no, I've got to get up, I've got to train. What motivates you to do that? What's your main motivation?
um I don't want to get into bed that night with regret, basically. um it's so easy to stay in bed, but it's like I need to get myself out of bed before I let myself talk myself into staying in bed. Like, you need to get out before your brain's registered how comfy and warm it is still in here and how cold it is outside. And just like, "Ugh, cool, get up, turn the coffee machine on. Let's keep going." Um, actually, that's another thing that I do, is just make sure that I've got all of the stuff that I need for that morning set up the night before. So I've got my training kit out. I've got um, my food there ready to go. Like, if I'm off to work as well, like, all my work gear's packed in the bag. I've got my yogurt muesli in the fridge. All I need to do is just grab it out and go, so that it maximizes the amount of sleep I get to have, and it's the least amount of decisions that need to be made the next morning. It's just like everything's there ready to go. Even my training pack will be in the car, and my work gear will be in the car. Like, it's just having those sort of things set up make a huge difference to not having something kind of go wrong in the morning. But yeah, I just want to make sure that I've given it everything, basically. And you just get up, and you never want to, but gosh, it feels good once you're up. Once you're up and you're moving, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm at the climbing gym trying to do a 45-minute warm up because it's so damn cold. I've probably scraped frost off the windscreen of the car, and it feels good once you're doing it, and you're just like, yeah, this is what it takes. I'm doing it, and yeah, it's fun. I'm going to be glad to not have to do that though.
You certainly picked one of the coldest places in New South Wales to sort of base yourself at. That's for sure.
Oh, it's frigid. Yeah. It's summer and I'm wearing a hoodie at the moment and long pants. It was cold this morning.
How do people react when you tell them that, I guess, you climb, I guess, professionally? Obviously, a lot of people would know you from your time as an Australian Ninja Warrior and sort of your success there. But when you tell them that, yeah, I'm climbing, I'm going to do sport climbing at the Olympics, what's sort of their reaction?
Oh, it's climbing part of the Olympics. That's cool. How does that work? That's kind of how the conversation goes. But it was funny the other day. I was off. I can't remember where I was, but there was a couple of people there that I kind of half knew and half didn't, and then someone kind of came up to me and was like, "Oh, congratulations getting into the Olympics and blah blah blah." And the couple of people that were there, maybe it was in the main street of town, like, it's a small little community. They're like, "Are you in the Olympics? What?" And it was just like this moment where, yeah, you kind of just see someone see you in a different way, and it was kind of a trip out. Um, and I guess it was slightly similar doing the Ninja Warrior thing. At the I'll never forget it. The In the first season, after my first heat, the first night I had on TV, um, we had to go down to Sydney to do a bit of shopping or something, and we were down in the Penrith Plaza in the kids' room. My daughter's maybe 2 or 3. She's probably 2 at the time, and changing a nappy. And this woman's kind of like looking at us sideways in the change room, like, oh, like, what's she thinking? Like, have we got something on our face? What's going on? She's like, "Were you on TV last night? Were you that Ninja Warrior?" Like, yeah, yeah, that was me. "Can I have a photo?" And so this first, like, famous selfie photo I've had was in the change room at Penrith Plaza. Pretty much dirty nappy in one hand, and
You got to
yeah.
start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was also, kind of like a funny sort of I don't know, yeah. Yeah, it was great. But yeah, no, it is cool to see people kind of become interested in climbing. And I think as the climbing gyms become bigger, there's more of an understanding of what climbing is, and that translates pretty well. And the Olympics obviously translates for people. Like, they know what that is and what it means. And yeah, it's just it's pretty special to be able to be a part of that. And um yeah, our local community up here in the Blue Mountains, you know, the town's only a few thousand people, and everyone's just so psyched, and it's really cool to see that. And I think in the middle of all of the craziness that's going on, kind of cool to yeah, just be a part of something positive.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot more random photo encounters after you compete in Tokyo. That's for sure. I guess
Yeah.
last question for me is something that I ask everyone to kind of wrap up the interview, and kind of tries to get you to reflect, not just on your sport, but life in general, is what are you most proud of in your life so far? It could be sport climbing related. It could be something completely outside of that.
Um, yeah, interesting. Um, I'm really proud of my daughter and the life that my partner and I have with her. Um, yeah, it's something that you just you, you you just can't ever explain that feeling of being a parent and how much joy your kid or kids bring to you. Like it's such a special thing. Um, yeah, and it just is from day one. Like when I first held Audrey, I just cried and cried and cried because it's just this like it's crazy instant love that you have for them. And it was such a special thing. And through all of the um, hardship of life, like she's just there as our little thing. And God, they push you hard sometimes. They know how to push your buttons, and they push you right to the edge of breaking, and sometimes even beyond it. But then they just kind of do this little smile at you, and you're just like, oh, your heart melts again. Um, it's worth it, yeah. Um, but I guess in the climbing kind of space, it's been uh, it was tricky going through all the training basically for the Olympic side of things, and I felt really proud of having not given up because I came close a couple of times to just going, you know what, I'm not cut out for it. I'm just going to go climbing outside again, and not have to worry about the stress of training and all that stuff and the pressure that builds up. But I felt really proud of not giving up and continuing on. And yeah, that was something that I think can just expand the rest of my life as well, as just that like digging in and putting in the hard work. And yeah, I felt really proud of basically the work that I put in to get there. And I felt that before the competition, like driving into the competition before it all kicked off. It's like, I feel really proud of what I've done. No matter what happens from here, it's a success. So yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to wrap it up, Tom. We cannot wait to see you competing over there in Tokyo, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more baby selfies in the change rooms once you come back,
Yeah.
and you become a household name after leading Australia in this wonderful new sport over in Tokyo.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on and having the chance to have a chat. It's been awesome.